Hello there, brilliant humans. Today's episode is an adventure down the road of social media usage and its effects on your psychology from a content creator's perspective. Our guest today is Samina Mahanbetazhieva, and she is a digital enterprise management student with many talents. She's involved in PR communications at Clearco and the University of Toronto Admissions Office with a really active social media presence. Social media connects us all, but also takes a toll on many of us. Today, we talk about the status game being played in social media, the subconscious psychological effect of media in our lives, how we should repurpose social media for our well-being, and much more. If you are interested in following Samina on her social media platforms, you can find it in the description below, and let us know on our socials in the link tree in the About Us section if you have an interesting subject yourself that you would like to share on our platform. This is the Glass Prism Podcast. Enjoy. Samina, welcome to the Glass Prism. How are you?
Good. I'm really happy to be here.
We had a casual chat before this episode started airing, so yeah, it was an interesting one. I'm hoping a lot of the stuff that we talked about earlier is going to find its way into the episode today.
We'll find a way.
All right, cool. So you are incredibly active on social media, okay? Is it fair to say you're an influencer, by the way?
No. There's a really fine line between an influencer and a content creator. I mean, they can overlap, but influencer is a legit person who is already experienced. Nowadays, of course, especially after pandemic, a lot of, there's a lot of influencer wannabes, like people, especially students who are trying to utilize their social media and turn it into somewhat influencer-like. And it's not easy, of course. You have to raise your audience. You have to have your own niche. And being a person, for example, myself, I'm having this challenge of focusing on one niche because I have too many interests. So I would call it just I am a content creator, but not an influencer, because this is I just create content based on my life, based on my experiences, but I'm nowhere near being an influencer. So
okay.
Yeah. I don't know why people call it.
Fair enough. I don't think many people know the distinction though. As a content creator, you have that flexibility of choosing what you want, and basically your life comes first before what you end up posting. So your posts are inspired by your life, and you're not necessarily looking out to do things for the purpose of
absolutely.
filling up things for your audience.
That's very accurate. Yeah.
So do you enjoy having a strong media presence?
I would say so, because thanks to that, many opportunities have come my way, whether they're jobs, collaborations, both in kind, sponsorships too. Sometimes, you get free stuff. Just, even being a content creator, by creating content, you work with I personally create content for other brands, through a agency right now. I just create content for, there's different companies that I've worked with, which I'm not allowed to disclose because I signed an NDA, but
we can cut that part.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, better too. So many opportunities came my way. That was jobs, collaborations, in-kind and monetary sponsorship sometimes too. And of course, the most importantly, I was able to build new connections, and explore, I learn more new things and apply them into my own voice, to amplify the message, what I want to share, what they do, what the reasons or causes that are really important to me. So yeah, I would, especially as a creative person, it's your opportunity to showcase your talents. And in terms of the story time, I actually started my social media with my photography and videography work only. I didn't have my face on it at all, so I thought I'm going to treat it as my portfolio and everything. But of course, and that was at the age of 12. I think that's when Gen Zs are using social media since a very early age, during their teen years, and our generation was the first one to grow up with social media. So I started off with photography works, and then slowly integrating into my persona, my own self, and by this time it has become a platform where it's for my personal brand, who I am, what kind of person I am, what things I'm interested in, and what I do, so.
That's awesome. Do you think there's a fine line between creating it so that it gives you that type of advantage in your life and actually abusing it? Because I've seen the amount of engagement on your pages. Like it's surreal. Doesn't it feel like there are a lot of people watching you at any one moment in time? Do you feel a pressure that you're going to have to like make sure that whatever you do is right and so on and so forth?
Absolutely. It's like 100%. I always like think twice before posting anything, because a lot of issues in our world are so controversial, and like, there are different sides to, like, there are different sides of the coin, right? Like you can look into one issue from one perspective into another. And of course, like with the cancel culture right now being a huge thing, especially after the pandemic, like at its best, cancel culture helps to keep the companies and public figures accountable. But at its worst, it's also like, if you disagree with something, you're going to be attacked by a lot of people, and like you're going to be called out on things that you're wrong at. And it's really risky in that sense, right? So I try to avoid speaking on certain topics, whether it's like politics, like religion. Those are really, it's just like everyone has a different approach, and everyone is different, everyone has a different values. For the most part, I try to make sure that I come from a really understanding perspective from both sides and state why, like certain, like I see things in certain way, but like I always keep my, window open to more perspectives, because I want to learn too, like there are many things that, we live and learn. Like, if we have an open mind, that's the only time when we actually understand and, approach everything with empathy.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful message. How do you think the media and media representations has affected people's sense of identity?
For some people, it has helped them to find their own selves, to find who they are. That's for sure. But there's also another side that actually makes them a little bit more lost, like on what they should be and what they shouldn't be. Because, with social media image, like, a lot of like it sets a certain standard for how your life is supposed to be, which of course is not like real. Like it's not realistic. Most of the things, everyone knows that social media is just the best side of everyone's life. Nobody's going to talk about anything that is not good. When they do, it must be like, it is a serious issue, right? Like it's a really big issue on a daily basis. Like it is not healthy, like to follow the standards. And like, it's really important that to understand that what is on social media is not real. Like it's not always real.
It's selective, right? Exactly. Selective self-presentation.
Absolutely. And, with the growing teenagers, especially, like, there are certain issues, with mental health, because the teenagers are believing that this is the real life. They feel that their lives are not as worthy, if that's worthy, is that the correct word?
Yeah. They don't feel like they're living up to their peers.
The standards or the peers. And so that just like keeping in mind that everything is always filtered through the content.
Actually, there's a psychologist by the name of Leon Festinger, right? And he's the one who termed the social comparison theory.
Oh, really?
And the idea behind that is that people compare their conditions to others to find out how well they're doing and how well they're living. So right now, people are living better lives than the pharaohs of Egypt, who are like gods to their people, right? Like in terms of quality of life. Like if you show the pharaohs of Egypt a fridge, they'll probably think you're godly, right? But everybody has a fridge now, and everyone has like a roof on top of their heads. And I'm talking generally here. I'm not saying everyone as in like everyone without any exceptions. But I'm talking about, generally speaking, the quality of life that we have now, that we're leading as a people worldwide, is much better than it was even 100 years ago, right? Yeah. And you can even go as to say like it's so much better than what it was 20 years ago, right? So the level of quality of life is increasing at an exponential rate for us. Yeah. Still, people are very dissatisfied. And that fundamentally changes the way that you think of satisfaction. Is that does satisfaction mean that I need to address the needs that I have as a human, or is it the needs that I have already satisfied relative to those around me? Because if everybody else is doing much better than I am, and like, what do I have, right? It's like, am I going to be happy with that state? A lot of people might not think of it in absolute terms, because when they think of quality of life, they think of things that are very materialistic. such as, do I have the best car? Do I have the best house? Do I have the best not friends? Those are not materialistic. the best tech. Do I have a lot of money? Right. Yet when we look at, for example, are you aware of Maslow's hierarchy of needs?
Of course.
Yeah. So
any business class covered that.
Yeah, anybody who's taken a business class, a marketing class, or whatever, they know about this hierarchy. But for those who don't, it's basically this pyramid where you have to satisfy the lower levels of your human needs to then progress throughout the pyramid. So like the base of the pyramid would be food, right? And shelter. And as you go along, it will be like relationships and then like self-actualization and so on and so forth. But everybody today flipped that pyramid on its head, right? Mm. It's like those needs for food and everything, even though like it's critical to your condition for your survival, a lot of people are just looking at the things like, these people are outside partying, I'm inside, like doing schoolwork and so on and so forth. So this selective self-presentation has amplified that to an unbelievable level. It's like people started thinking to themselves that they're not worthy of living at all because of the amount of things that they see in social media. It's quite sad. So you told me that it does affect young people, especially because they don't necessarily have the capability of like thinking critically of their situation. It's like, no, these guys are just showing that part where they went to so-and-so, but I've skied before, like I just didn't post it up, or else those same people at the same time where they're doing their midtermers or whatever will be feeling the same. So yeah, absolutely.
And in terms of like, I guess we'll touch on to that like later, but you mentioned the teens and the mental health specific aspects. So when you mentioned the part of like, identity and mental health, like the biggest part that has been influenced by social media is the self, body image or self representation, specifically when it comes to beauty standards, especially for women, like
especially for young teens that are girls. And
and in 90s, for example, women didn't have to do much to be considered beautiful, but like today you need to look certain way, like have like certain shape of the body to be considered beautiful. And that is definitely like a really harmful for the younger growing generations and most of the people. It's like common sense by now. But like what I guess teens or like some people don't realize is that to look this way, it takes a lot of, time and money too, like to do your makeup perfectly, to have your like fillers in, or like, lip injections, etc. Or like, to have your body sculpting sessions and etc. And the demographic that has been like harmed the most about it is just females, the growing teen females for sure. Even in the recent years, that there has been an increase in like plastic surgeries for women, and even cosmetic procedures too, due to the social media impact of social media. And that is really painful to watch, but we all become like, women have become a lot more insecure about themselves, because it's like a part of their nature to like, I mean, it's a part of any like the human's nature in general to be wanted to be accepted by others, and to have that sense of validation from other people. And that's what makes this social media so I guess toxic in a way, because you're seeking, because of those psychological triggers that are there, like the number of likes, shares, or like, I don't know, comments and etc. They're making people insecure because, for example, like when you have like, say I see 1,200 people watching my stories per se, right? And then like only half of them are actually going there to like my post per se. And I start to think why the other half didn't like it. Like, what do I look like, bad, or did I say something wrong? What could be the reason why they potentially didn't like it? Of course, like most of the times it's not personal at all, but it does like trigger you at the back of your mind to consider those things. And you're like, because you do want to improve it, right? And when it comes to like of course they're built in this way, the platforms themselves, to make sure that they are addictive, and people are actually dependent on that. And because of this sense, like natural sense of validation to be accepted in your crowd or like in your habit, like community, they're so powerful and so impactful.
An interesting question that came to mind while you were talking about this is that I'm wondering how much that has stuck with you. Like, how did you mature out of it?
Oh, that's a long story, I guess. But like, because, of course, we are the first generation to be growing up with social media. I have been actually the victim of all of these influences. During my high school years, like I had bulimia and I almost got anorexia actually.
Wow.
I don't know if I can talk about it, but like biologically, some of my systems have been like shutting down, and I had to actually move on to hormonal pills to bring my, my systems back. My body I was literally like skinning in the eyes of people. And when I was living in boarding house back at the time, and my house parents were checking on me. They were like, "Are you okay? Like, are you eating well?" And I was like, "I'm good." But, it's actually throwing up every time I eat. It's not healthy because on social media, you have to be skinny, you have to look good and everything. So I had this inner conflict with my own self-image and my self-confidence, self-esteem. And, there's also a culture aspect to it, because like any conservative background, usually likes to judge or, shame you for like your self-expression in certain ways. And, when you are like, there's certain like, do this, don't do this, try to follow this, be modest and etc. Right? Like, there's different like things to check in, and they kind of mess with your own understanding of like, okay, but what do I like? What like, how do I like myself? How do I like to present myself? Right? Like, how do I want to look? So, definitely those, like, there's a lot of cases of like, girls having those eating disorders during teenage years because of that, and having this self-image. But like, in terms of like how I came to this understanding of like, this is just who I am. People have different, like bodies, different genes, different backgrounds, or like even your ethnicity plays a role, because what we see on this, like what we used to see back then, like right now to this point, there's so much more diversity, I guess, in social media. And like, because big companies started to promote diversity, like different, people coming from different ethnicities and backgrounds. But back then it was all kind of, predominantly white like image of beauty and beauty standards. And like, I used to kill myself just saying, oh my God, I don't have, blonde hair or blue eyes. My eyes are not as big per se or something like that, So that was really harmful, because like, I cannot change that. This is so out of my control. And like, wanting to change that is messed up. Like, you shouldn't have those thoughts about yourself. Like, this is just like who you are. And, you can find your own ways of how to, make yourself feel more like, confident through, and how to express yourself, how to, look after yourself, essentially, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that definitely does. So, I want to ask you about, how much do you think this is a status game regarding the presentation of oneself to look up to what's being portrayed in social media and what's being liked and all that, and wanting to be a part of that? So obviously, if whatever is being portrayed to you as the most feminine, powerful, beautiful type that you can possibly be, and there are characteristics that you do not have within that image that you've created for yourself, or what has been basically pushed onto you, then it's a matter of feeling like you're lesser than, because of the fact, right? And there's a lot of things that make social media this really big status experiment, where it's like, the more that you have followers, the more that you have likes, the more that so on and so forth, the more that people approve of you, the more power that you have, and the more influence you've got, and the more happier you are, and the better the life that you've got, so that you feel more superior to others. But being goaded by so much of this stuff that keeps on reminding you, if you decide on disconnecting, is the idea that you're forever going to be less, That's
definitely like an interesting point to consider. And, humans are naturally like use almost anything to symbolize their status, like, whether it's money, whether it's like, amount of followers, or like, your material things too, the car you're driving, the place you live at. And it definitely does affect like, your digital status game. You have this online persona that you create yourself, and you have like the full control over, like, how deciding how you want to display it. And there's many stories of people who went into debt trying to showcase their luxury lives on social media, and then like really funny.
There's way too many now.
It's really funny, like to watch that, but like it's also a problem, like seeing that people are that desperate for this social validation to like put so much at stake. Like, as you said, the basic needs are not there, but you're trying to satisfy your like least important needs, which is like, social validation. You're so like, anything you're online, you're what's it called? Like, people do anything to maintain that reputation, even if it means that, going to that. But like the social media allows you to create your personal brand that will benefit you, but you have to know your limits to which you go to, and make sure that you are actually, it's not your priority like in life, because for some people it is. And this is when they're becoming addicted to people's opinion, about them, and the validation from them. So
yeah, from an evolutionary biology perspective, I know that the human brain has never been made to live in two realities. So once the reality becomes Instagram, Facebook, whatever, and they see themselves going down in the pecking order because of how much like attention they're getting as opposed to others that they've seen around them, it's a game that you can't win, mostly because of the fact that there's no such thing as being the most famous, right?
Absolutely.
Like there's always those type of ideas that are going to be in the back of your head. And it's a ladder that doesn't necessarily get you much after you've started climbing it. It just makes you want to climb even higher. And even when you're climbing higher, that doesn't necessarily translate to how much, how well you're living your life, because this may be a immature topic for people to understand. And that is, the things that really matter in life end up really truly being the meaningful things that other humans can offer for you. The idea of having, let's say, a family, friends, those type of experiences, things that genuinely everybody else was doing, like all of our ancestors were doing pre-social media, to have that sense of fulfillment. It's like, if people around you support you, that is truly meaningful. Everyone else, not so much, because the social media also creates a platform in which you have an audience that is global, right? And not only is it global, we're not talking about like a handful of people. We're talking about, quite honestly, half the world's population actively looking at what you're doing, and you can reach to them, right? Throughout human history, people have been growing up in small tribes of like 100, 150. Could you imagine trying to be appealing to 150 and then like 2 generations down to billions of people? It's difficult because everybody else has their own ideas of what's good, what's not good, what's, for example, for young teenage girls, like what's beautiful, what's okay to do, all these type of things. And I've realized like girls also embody these things much more than guys do, even though there's also a lot of studies that suggest that guys who end up spending a lot of time on Instagram, Facebook, so on and so forth, have also higher depression rates, but not to the degree that girls do. So it's incredible, like the fact that this can change the way that even your brain, the way that it develops, especially during the teenage years. There's a developmental cycle that girls go through and guys go through that is very different in terms of how their brains develop. And now they're seeing a lot of like very physical changes because of the fact that they're living like this whole separate life online. And I wish to tell you that these changes were great. It actually shows that, like, for example, your emotional regulation goes down. Narcissistic tendencies psychologically go up. A lot of the thoughts about like what ends up being the characteristics of fulfillment end up being money, material. how many people look up to you, that type of thing. But yeah, it's destructive. But I think by the time that people know this, like once they've grown, it's already too late. Right.
And to address the gender specific like difference in the impact of social media on the body image per se, it's rooted from the fact that like for decades, the girls are it's an upbringing of the children, right? Like the girls are always, complimented as you're so pretty, right? But like, and that's an achievement, right? Like, but they never say like, oh, you're so smart, you're so talented. But like this usually goes to guys from experience, right? So like unconsciously we are always like driven towards looking good, like this is our priority. This is like girls should be always neat, always looking good, like watching their style, always have this sense of fashion, while guys are supposed to be like working like no matter how you look, no matter what you like, what kind of things you're doing, right? But as long as you are like I don't know, you are successful in terms of like career, your income, if you can sustain a family, that's like, the indicator of success. But for girls, it's the beauty. And that's the reason why it's so impacted, right? Like the guys are not so much affected by these changes in beauty standards as the girls are. So
yeah, it's, what's really phenomenal? There's a study that we talked about in class in one of my courses, right? I was talking about there is a direct relationship how tall a man is and how big he is, as in like whether it is muscular or just by weight in general, and the amount that they get paid for a job.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. And for girls, it's the total opposite. It's like the more apparently attractive they are, and the more, let's say, slim, they get paid more, which is surreal. Like I haven't. These are subconscious, by the way. It's not like, oh, we're going to look for the most attractive person. They're going to help our company. It's the idea that whenever you're about to negotiate something, even in the negotiation stage, you're much more likely to offer them something better because you feel like they're giving something up. Even if the merits across all your candidates that you're going to hire for, they're all the same. It's just like you're going to look at that person. It's like, you know what? He looks like the type of person that would look powerful. I want that person in my company. It's unbelievable.
It's unconscious bias, like that has been there, and it's like it's our natural like tendency to judge and select based on those biases. And it's sad that they exist, but they do. That's just the reality of it.
Yeah, but we can mediate that, right? So the idea, like that's why we have science. We can tell, okay, here's the things that we're consciously like biased towards, or subconsciously biased towards. Here are the things that we can change about that to offset it, right? Because could you imagine someone else being paid more than you because like they've got a bigger belly? Like that makes no sense. Or like they're slimmer than you. That's surreal. And especially since this is probably, I'm only taking a guess here because obviously I haven't seen the studies regarding this, but this probably has been highly perpetuated by the media that we are living in. Like, honestly, if you watched some type of office movie, half the people there, the old men, like you can take a guess at who's like owning the company as part of the board of directors. And it's like those people, those white old men with gray hair, right? Those are the guys that are running everything. This has affected the way that we do things, even subconsciously. Like even if you consciously went like, nah, I'm not going to hire somebody for these reasons, this is wrong. Just being exposed to these things. This is the impact of media on our psyches. Is that just simply being exposed can affect you in a way that you don't even want it to happen.
Definitely. And I think like right now I think thanks to social media, like social media is being a tool that like helps to like address those issues, right? Like people are spreading awareness about it. And like, I think we're seeing some change. Like, I mean, especially after the Black Lives Matter movement, like in 2020, the big one. I mean, it has lasted for years, but like 2020 was like when we saw change, corporations started their like, specifically, like diversity initiatives. They are trying to highlight the diversity and acceptance of those. So it's glad to see that social media can be a tool for that.
So you mentioned that social media has a positive effect when people use it for that purpose. Do you think the reason that people don't use it as much for those purposes, or at least isn't effective in forwarding those positive agendas, is mostly because of the platform or the functionality of a social media platform, or is it because of the people? So what do you think is inherently the problem here, the thing that we need to change? Because I know that social media was built inherently to focus on the biases of human beings so that they can get more engaged. So that usually ends up like really about things that are pervasive, controversial, things that keep people's attention but divides them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what would you change to think that, okay, how do you make social media a tool for good more so than a tool for all of the things that we mentioned so far on this episode?
Definitely. I mean, it's really a complicated topic because like there is some censorship in social media. Like what makes social media so like powerful is that like you have a voice, like every person has has a say in whatever, like their perspective in any issue that they like talking about. So, and like compared to like traditional news sources like that filter information and try like really carefully pick the words and phrasings on how to deliver that, say, propaganda per se, right? Because of course news sources can be biased too, right? But social media is more transparent because it comes from people, and as you said, that's the people that make social media so powerful, like the people who turn social media into a tool, not the social media itself, right? Like, so before, if you think about like, when Instagram, for example, just started in like, I remember like the first time I actually created an account was like 2013 or 2012. 2013.
Yeah, I think roughly that.
Right. Yeah. So that's when I actually created Instagram. And, of course, the first, like Facebook was created in 1997, right? I believe.
Facebook?
Yeah.
I think, no, it's much later than that. I think it was like 2005.
Okay. I believe like the first social media was created in 1997.
First social media was actually the Well in 1980s.
Okay.
Yeah. But that was like 500 people that were using that.
Yeah. But yeah, regardless, it's just like, back at the time when it just like has started to gain popularity, like the only thing that was there were just personal pictures of people, right? Like it was never any movement for social cause or anything, right? But then people figured out a way to use it towards social changes, right? Like to see social changes. They started like using this as a platform for their voice to spread awareness on certain issues. And I guess like that's the people who shifted from depending on the use. Yeah, if that makes sense.
No, that makes sense. Is because there are a lot of arguments though, a lot of documentaries that mention this, that throughout the conception of Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, and so on, the wonderful people in Silicon Valley decided to create these algorithms to make sure that you're on there more.
Absolutely.
But that also got taken advantage of by many companies who decided to take that as an opportunity to further whatever agendas that they've got.
Yeah.
So I think the platform also has something to do with what type of things that we're seeing. Truthfully, I like to believe this is that people generally are much more virtuous than they are keen to cause damage. And a lot of the things that end up being negative are towards, for example, a personal righteous opinion that end up being utilized in the wrong way because they believe it's more purposeful than that.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So.
And seeing the social media becoming more commercialized, like it's like, as you said, trying to serve the company's agendas, collecting our data, and, like trying to tailor the ads based on that. Of course, it is like, what made social media a social media in the first place is becoming less and less obvious.
Yeah. So like one of the things that I believe makes social media is the idea of it evolving what the space looks like depending on how the people would like to use it for, right? So social media platforms don't end up just being what they are right now and never changing as they move along. They end up evolving. That could be something such as, I don't know, Facebook gaming, right? Who, for those people who are interested in watching people stream games, they can go on Facebook now and they can stream that through them. Facebook gaming obviously would have been not something that Facebook was focusing on, let's say 5-7 years ago, but it's now changing. So I'm wondering if there is something that people can force into innovation, like the innovative stage of creating such a platform for the purposes of furthering some of these social causes, so that it has more of an impact. Because right now, the platforms that we currently operate in might not be the best or the most efficient ways to further these agendas, right? So what are your thoughts on that? Like, what are some ideas actually? Like, let's say you're let's say you're a consultant to Mark Zuckerberg and you're like, hey, listen, man, I have this fantastic idea and it's going to change the world for the better. I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but what do you think?
I mean, when it comes to like social causes per se, like social political issues, because we discussed how, media censorship, the fact that, sometimes especially, for example, during the Israeli and Palestinian situation, there has been like a lot of events where when Facebook has, took down any stores that mentioned the word, using mentioned the word Palestine, for example, right? Like, because of their relationship with the country, right? So like, I guess, of course, you shouldn't be like shutting people's voices just like that. But at the same time, I want to make sure that there's no propaganda, right? Like misinformation is another challenge that is in the social media space, right? Because people can be misinformed and then believe. That was the case with the COVID-19 at the beginning, right? What is true, what is myth, right? And
it's the case with a lot of things, to be honest with you. Like, especially if you know what you're talking about, when you see what everybody else is saying.
Yeah. So, it's just like, I don't think there is a solution to that yet, because I guess the argument is like, yes, you do need a censorship, but like it shouldn't be like crossing the political lines, like if there's censorship to personal level, like, or like especially things that are controversial, when it comes to religion, like politics, those, I guess, when it comes to those topics, let people like talk what they think. But when it comes to things that are like, things that are threatening certain like minority group, like if it's a racial issue, right? Like when people are being racist, or, throwing really offensive statements per se, like based on the history, right? Per se, I guess those things can be censored from that perspective. But if other than the socio-political issues, if when it coming to a more personal level, the change that I would like to see on the social media was like, removing some of their features that, like, for example, likes, number of likes. Like it is helpful to see, how much engagement you got, but like maybe limited to your own self. Like, Facebook was already on the way to, implementing this feature, but now they made it like optional now. If you want to see the like count, you can agree to that. But it's still like, as I mentioned earlier, the case with the scenario with the number of views versus number of like, likes, like you're trying to find, the reasons. You're trying to overthink what could be the reason, and that affects your self-confidence and self-esteem. And, because of that, like there's no much benefit from having that feature, like that could be taken down completely, not like making it optional or based on the countries, take it down completely. You can still have comments because people want to make sure that, to share their thoughts about something. But the only thing that like does is just showing that you like the picture, like you liked it. But like, people are becoming so more on a personal level, people are becoming so much more conscious of it. Like they're becoming too dependent on it. Like, they're trying to get their like instant gratification from receiving those likes per se, right? So there's like a psychological issue that impacts the mental health.
Yeah.
For
corporations to mediate and regulate some of these things, it's very difficult to choose how to regulate it and what ends up being censorship.
Yeah.
For example, like if you decided on giving the power of some type of party to censor some type of thing, then it could be a political weapon, let's say, to redefine what is offensive, so that you end up censoring the things that ultimately don't follow through with your agenda. So some of the things that I've seen Facebook do is very selective. And even if they do keep saying that this is for the purposes of, I don't know, social security and whatever, it really doesn't feel that way. And it's not only it doesn't feel that way, it's way too selective for anybody to go like, okay, this is something that is clearly targeting my group. Regardless, because I do not believe that these platforms should be regulating anything at any point. If anything, I believe the majority of the people will, like, I believe that there should be power for the people to demonstrate what is more right than wrong, even if there are a lot of wrong. But I do not think that it would end up eclipsing the right if you end up having everybody, right? So like the right to say what you say isn't necessarily eclipsed by let's say the guideline of not being offensive, even though you don't want people to be offensive. You don't, if you censor them, they're going to find another way. Like people who are trying to be racist aren't going like, oh darn, I can't even use it on Facebook. They're going to figure out how they're going to further their mandate with or without Facebook, with or without Instagram. And even when Facebook is on their team for like whatever things is going on, especially with the Palestinian struggle right now, you can see it's used for all the wrong reasons. So giving them the power to regulate is very difficult, because even if you do not see what's going on because of how well they're regulating it, that's affecting the way that you're perceiving the situation. Definitely. Right? What type of news and stuff like that.
So yeah, and that is like kind of the way that we can solve it, like not specifically in a political way, but probably on a personal way, maybe somewhat in a political level too, but like more education. Like I think having more awareness at schools, institutions, and or even like in a like traditional households, right? Like in your home, like having this education and awareness to what is acceptable and what is really, you know, what causes arguments, right? Like for example, when it comes to politics, it's a little bit more, it's harder to define, but like with the personal level, you know, things that are like, you know, racism, sexism, like things, transphobia, you know, homophobia, etc. Like these things should be more like talked about, specifically, like, you know, trying to give people the perspective of the people of the minority group per se, right? And you know, like if we're not censoring media, of course, this is probably not going to be the best solution to do so. And as you said, people will find another way to say it, to do it, right? And that's the importance of education in that part. Like you have to know the reason why it's not acceptable, why you shouldn't be like, you know, like being so discriminative of specific groups of people based on their background, like, you know, gender or orientation. So I guess like I really believe that education can help us to get there, where we're becoming more inclusive society, more you know, empathetic society. So yeah.
Who do you think are the educators?
I would say, well, it comes in different levels. Like I would say, like what I didn't have in school per se, or like I didn't have any I'm saying high school or middle school, like during those years, because we have to be educated on these issues, like specifically on a personal level, you know, like your racism, sexism, etc. Like you have to be educated by them from the early age, because, you know, a lot of like children are bullying, like children are so easy to bully, right? Like they're bullying each other. This is like really, it's really common, because, you know, sometimes, you know, you even think because they're not so like educated or developed yet, like, you know, it really comes from your household. This responsibility comes on the parents, on schools, on, you know, educational like institutions. So I'd say like the education comes there, but also on your personal level, like, you know, like teaching people to be more open-minded, like to try to understand other people's perspectives will help us to, you know, progress as a society, I think.
Because when we talk about educators, it's very difficult to pinpoint who will be a reliable educator. Because educators, to me at least, aren't people who tell you what to think. It's people who show you how to approach different problems. And these type of educators are so lacking in our society. It's very difficult to find people who are not only open-minded enough to understand that there are many nuances to the issues that they're presenting, but also to present it in a way where people can actually understand it, like at a young age, I mean. Especially with the ideas of racism, sexism, all this type of things. It's very difficult to explain these things to a 10-year-old who plays obviously with everyone and like generally picks up things that are negative from the people around them. So it's the culture that they find back home, and then when they come to school, that's when they start, demonstrating these type of things. But it wasn't innate, right? Like a white, black, brown baby wouldn't discriminate against another white, black, brown baby because they look different. As long as they play with me, I don't really care, right? So that's one of those ideas, is because it seems like adults care more about those things than children do. So it's even knowing about, it's this cultural change that I do not think that one singular party can actually get right. But if everybody has the intention of getting it right, and that is the main idea, is like if everybody gets the intention of wanting it to change, that's when we will see the change.
Yeah. It is true, but I also think like, when people ask you who's your role model, most people just name their parents, right? Like my dad was a role model for me, my mom, right? The closest to them. And when I said like, parents are being in their educators, as you said, lead by examples, not necessarily about what you say, but what you do, right? How you treat people.
Exactly.
And of course, children naturally are not discriminative at all. And as you said, as long as you play with me, like, we're friends, but these are coming from the families themselves too, like the values that you teach your children within your family are going to be like, reflected in the, as you said, school setting, for example, right? Like, and that's what I'm saying, like, importance of having both parents, and educational system too. So like, promoting that certain behavior is not acceptable, certain discriminative behavior is not acceptable is important too. That's what I'm saying. Like, when you're taught that from an early age, knowing that, this is offensive, don't say that, or don't do this, or like, be like, try, like, we all are like equal per se, right? Is like, it sets your values for your whole life, because you're becoming this person. Like, I carry most of my values from my childhood, right? Like the things that my parents taught me, understanding, trying to like not, come to conclusions too fast without understanding other points, like other person's point of view. And certain values are being shaped as you grow up. And, if we have this, like, I think it's easier to pick up on inclusivity and like, this, like avoiding discrimination because you're held accountable by people around you in the society as an adult. But as a child, it's so much easier to like, harm other people based on those things. And that's what I'm saying, like the education and those parties should begin first,
Finish off here. What do you think? There's only one change that you want everybody to strive towards, that you think will have the most massive impact through their media or through whatever media they choose to consume. What do you think that would be?
It's a really hard question because there's so many aspects to it. On your personal level, like, okay, let me think actually.
Yeah, one change that you would focus on, because I know mine.
What is it?
Mine would be an increased sense of self-awareness. Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah, in terms of that, it's not really about the platforms changing. It's more about your personal relationship with social media, right? Yeah. Like, yeah, okay. In that case, of course, you have to know, like, social media is built to be addictive, to be distracting, and to be like, to address your insecurities. And I think in most cases, social media is like, if you feel insecure, if you feel like jealous of someone, or you're feeling like, you're worthless, you're feeling a certain way after seeing someone's post, it reflects your own insecurities, for some people, because for some people it might be the body image, right? Like if you have a perfect body, for some people it might be relationship, for some people it might be career growth, and etc., right? Like you never know what can cause insecurities in other people. So when you go into social media, you have to make sure that you're in the right state of mind to go into it. And there's certain practices, right? Like I personally really love taking detox times from social media and, completely tune out. Of course, I do lose some followers or like don't respond to messages or something. But it is sometimes when I feel like, I need to get myself together and get my life together. I know that this is going to be completely harmful for me in the current time. So I want to make sure that I tune out of this, because if I want to, I know that right now I'm really like, vulnerable, and I don't want to be affected by those outside, knowing that they're already like, not real, or like, they are filtered through, edited, Photoshop, etc. Or things that are said, of course, there's no perfect life. Nobody's living a perfect life. Everyone is having down times, good times. So it's really important to reflect on like what makes you feel in certain way, like where you feel insecure, where you feel like when you're feeling good. Like having a healthy relationship with social media is also really important if you're going into that space. And everyone knows like you learn so many things through social media. You're connecting with so many people, and like at this age and time, it's really hard not to have social media because everyone is asking to connect with you, especially after pandemic, right? But it's really important to reflect on your own relationship with it, right? Like, so that's why I brought up an example of like when I tune out of social media, because I know it's going to be harmful for me, because I'm going to judge myself, or like, I'm going to beat myself to the fact that like I'm like, I'm not that person. I'm right now I'm at my stuck period, but I know within myself that, I'm going at my own pace, and I am who I am. Mm-hmm. And I'm satisfied with that. I'm just, with every day I'm growing, and with every day I'm improving at my own pace, So looking at those perfect, like people who have achieved something in my vulnerable times is going to be harmful towards that relationship that I've already established with myself. So yeah, like establishing good habits along with the relationship with social media is important. Of course it can meddle in your way with productivity. I don't know if you happen to have these situations when you go into social media to do something, but you forgot because you just got distracted by other posts, other messages, and something, right? So for me, it happens a lot. Like I want to go into my saved post to check out some new place in Toronto, for example, to eat, or that I saved, right? Or like inspiration for my new type of content, right? That I'm working on in the moment. But then I get sucked into that space, and I respond to my messages that I left, and then I forget what I was supposed to do. And an hour or two after, I remember, and I was just like, it just killed my time like this. So you gotta make sure that you're aware of those things, and you have this certain like control over it. Like if you want to, if you're doom scrolling, like scrolling nonstop through feeds, trying to find a distraction when you're supposed to be working on something that is unhealthy. Like so that you got to work on that. You have to realize that. As you said, being self-aware of that is important. So that is like what I would like to, I guess, change in when it comes to your personal relationship with social media. Mm-hmm. But as of the platform itself, we already discussed so many aspects to it. So it's really, I guess, to sum it up, we want to make sure that like the censorship is not like being selective and doesn't benefit any company's agenda or any political party's agenda or any issue, right? Like we want to make sure that to keep social media purpose as it used to be, like, as it established, not commercialize it as much. So after this discussion, I like one of some of the things that I want you to take away from like our discussion is that, you have to establish your own, healthy relationship with social media per se, if you're participating in that medium, and whether you decide to take it to a content creator extent or like influencer extent, or decide to be really just, the watcher or like the viewer, observer. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like this is your choice, but make sure that you reflect on your own, like how it makes you feel like on that.
Wow. All right. That was the brilliant and wonderful Samina, everybody. Thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. How was that? Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, it was really interesting. We jumped into different topics that address the socio-political issues, I guess, and different sides of it.
And the personal stuff as well. Yeah. So where can people find you? What are your ads?
My ads?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm always free to connect on different platforms, of course, as a person who is relatively active on social media, both for work and for personal, trying to develop my personal brand. You can find me on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook I don't use as much, but like Instagram, LinkedIn, I have my own website if you want to leave a message there. Or even my email, but who goes there? I guess it's easier to go to DMs, and most of them are just starting at Samina Batirova. That's it.
Great. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.